I certify it was posted in accordance with the law. Yeah. So for board members, especially the new ones, this is what we do every year. This is a budget workshop. We're not voting tonight on anything. This is an overview of the budget. We try to get the budget, so we'll come back, and we've got some dates that we're going to give you when we have to come back and actually vote on the budget and then have hearings on it. So the way this goes today is I'm going to give an overview and a lot of the information you've seen before, so I'll make my part pretty quick. And then Jennifer Mott is going to come up, the CFO, and go through the detail of the budget. A lot of this you saw in the February workshop that we had, kind of a broad overview of things, and there was a little more detail. So are you going to control it from back there? Can I control it from here, is the question. Thank you. So that's the agenda we were talking about. And I'll be sensitive to my time because a lot of this is a repeat, but I wanted you to see the kind of the philosophy and kind of where we are. And so again, just a repeat of, and I always put this up here just as a reminder of how large we are. And just so you'll know, we'll probably mention this again, but our enrollments right now are up 3.9%. So we're looking good for the fall, which means I think we're back on track again after about a year and a half of, I think, after the post-hurricane issues that we had. You might take a look down there about how many students we've had and what our average growth rate is. And so we've got that projected out for you so you can see what some of the challenges are. We know, by the way, that we need to do planning and see where we think we're going to be in the next few years, and with some of the finances that we have and kind of where we are with assessed value and the way we see the state. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. You might take a look at the bottom and talk about how large we are. So we did an October 1 snapshot. So we'll have 70, altogether I think we have 7,700 employees come through here every year, something like that. But in October, we had 6,700 employees. This is the breakdown, and this is worth taking a look at just for a second, especially if you take a look at the age. We are young, and that's a good sign for us. That means we're the college of first choice coming directly out of high school. And if you'll take a look at the ethnicity, you might take a look and just add those numbers up a little bit. So if you take a look at the white population, so we're 70%, almost 70% diverse if you want to take a look at the other way. So, and what's happening every year is the Hispanic population has been roughly Hispanic population increases and the Anglo population drops a percentage point. And I think African American is holding pretty steady. The unknowns, you kind of carve those up. That's a combination. Either they didn't put something down there or we didn't understand it, but usually they just didn't put anything down there. So if you kind of carve that up, the African American population is holding pretty steady and has been. So this is where we are. I want to point out that the FYI budget is proposed at 461. That is operating and debt service. And then you can see we got some ranges down there for capital improvement. So we'll be spending over 520 or 20 to 50 million this year in our budget. You've seen this before, but everything we do in terms of our budget and our planning is wrapped around the strategic plan, and this is the simplified. We have a longer version of this if you want. You can see it. We have individual items in each area, but this is how we think. So when we're putting money and assigning money and trying to decide what our priorities are, it's at the top of that list is student success. As we work our way down, and we're going to talk about it. When Jennifer gives her presentation, we'll break it down and put it into individual categories for you just so you can see how we prioritize. You've already seen this before, but I put this back up here again just to remind you how large we are and where we stand. So we are one of the high achieving community, not only in size, but I'm just talking about in of what we're doing. Same thing with this. We transfer something I've said before, but we transfer almost 17,000 students out every year. 17,000. So that's the reason those university centers are so important to us, and all the articulation agreements we have, and just the relationships we have. We want to make sure our students are prepared, whether they're going into the workforce or they're going into the university. From my perspective, they're equally important. We've talked about this before. Very proud of this because the employees made this decision. And these are the construction projects. And I've said this before, but you can talk to Jennifer and some of her group. I've been impatient with the pace. And then I take a look at this and I think maybe I shouldn't be so impatient because we've 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Just 13 or so facilities we've either opened or revamped in a couple of years. So I'm probably not going to change my approach on things because I just think we're taking too long. But when I see this, I think, okay. And so these are the construction projects that are still to come. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So, and that will wrap up our $485 million bond referendum that passed in 2014. And Fallbrook is worth noting. Did we have Fallbrook? Yeah, we've got Fallbrook up, but we're not paying for that, by the way. The church is paying for that, the construction. A brief overview of where we are, just so you can see. So thank you for whoever did that. The Trustee Sullivan, I saw the same thing you did. This is the green chart you were looking at that we couldn't understand. So, okay, so the red is growing. So what we're doing is looking out over the next 4 or 5 years. And so you're going to see us, and when we do our planning, you all know that we do it in 5-year increments when we're trying to think out. And actually, we're thinking a little further than that now. And we're going to come back to the board and talk to you. Links area in particular has some long-term. We know how many first graders, fourth graders, eighth graders. We know what the retention rate is. We've got all kind of numbers on what the estimates are coming into the community. We know where the housing starts are. So we've been pretty accurate on except for the hurricane, we've been pretty accurate on our growth estimates. And then we know what percentage of the population we get. So when we're looking out over the horizon, this is where the growth is coming from right here, are the levels of growth. It's the same, no, there shouldn't be any surprises here. It's where we've had it before. And we'll be glad to give you whatever you want afterwards. That we put this up here just so you can see where we think we're going to be in 2024. However you want to take a look at this. We've got it in the red is credit and non-credit head count, and that's if you enrolled in 2 campuses, then we count you at each place because we have to have a parking place over there, and we have to have facilities, and we have to have faculty. And then the next one is just the fall head count. If you go down to the bottom, it's unduplicated. So what we do is add up the numbers. Even if you go to the fall head count, unduplicated, and then you add the workforce students in there, which is about 16,000, we're still up. In 2024, we're going to be over 100,000 students. Oh, this is still mine. Okay, so a couple of things that, and we had this up here before because it hasn't changed, but so these are our basic assumptions. So we're conservative on the estimates on the revenue and the expenses. And we've already seen where that comes in handy because we've made several adjustments in the budget in the year when we don't have either assessed value didn't hit or the collections don't hit or we had a hurricane. And so we want to leave some flexibility in the budget by being conservative on both sides of this. We are, in our thinking, we have a 2.5 to a 3% annual student growth, which means we're going to add about 15, and we still think that's conservative. We had estimated 3 before, and now that we're back on track again and just looking at all the numbers, that's where I think we're going to be. And we have this 16 to 20% cash reserve, and that was came from, and I know some of the board members who've been here before, but that came from Standard & Poor's made that recommendation, and J.P. Morgan made that recommendation that we get up to 20. And at the time, I didn't think that was, I thought that maybe was too much until I saw the hurricane and I saw what could happen. It's not could happen, it did happen. So we do think our overall goal is to get up to 20 to have money in reserves, because we're as you know, we're going to have other problems. Something's going to come up that we're not expecting. So for the new board members, so the range for tuition and fees and local taxes is based on board policy, and I think Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about that, but that's a board policy that we had that we would equalize as a percentage, and you're going to see that in some charts that Jennifer has. We want the students to pay the same percentage of the budget as taxpayers, and that had to do with us having a debate every year of we're going to raise tuition, and we haven't raised taxes. You'll see that. We haven't raised taxes. I can't tell you the last time we raised taxes before my time. So, and I do think we saw it this year. The state percentage of the LSC budget is expected to decrease, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But this year we picked up $700,000, which is 1% of our budget is $4 million. So $700,000 is not much for us at all. And that had to do with our contact hour growth. Now, the good news is if we continue our growth, our lack of growth after the hurricane, and when we had those enrollment hits, but if we continue to grow now, what they do in the next enrollment period is they compare us to where we were. And I mean, we're on the right path here, but you can't count on that. And we're counting over the long term the percentage, and we're going to see it next year, the percentage of the state contribution will be a decreasing percentage of our budget. And so that's how we're thinking. And we're going to talk about the tuition and fee increases that we had at the out-of-district. And that was a board decision before some of you came on also. So to get to the equalization, and Jennifer's got some really good charts that show you where we stand. These are just some of the issues we're considering all the time. We know our facilities are getting older, and then we've got college needs, we've got some system-wide projects we want to work on, and we try to put all that in the budget. The same thing with workforce and the special programs that we have, and we're always looking for opportunities to supplement our revenue. But these are business decisions that we're making. So that's the quick overview. So the detail of the way the budget looks is going to be Jennifer. And we can either answer questions while you're going. Yeah.
Could we go back to slide 20?
Yeah. Go ahead. You can do it from there if you would.
That last sentence, out-of-district state international tuition will increase to equal cost of in-district students. It almost sounds like that it's cheaper now to be out of district than it is to be, I know Linda's shaking her head, I know the answer to this. But it reads that out of district may be less expensive than in district. So could you just 30 seconds on?
You've got a chart that shows some of that, right? Some of the more detailed information. Can we come back? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I guess just, yeah, I see that the wording issue, I think the intent had been the cost of in-district students is covered by both in-district tuition and local taxpayers. So that, I think that was the intent, was for the out-of-district and out-of-state tuition to equal the cost of in-district students that is covered by both of those sources.
The wording on that's not right. Yeah, it's confusing. That's not what we...
Okay, I'm not trying to split hairs.
No, that's fine. We didn't catch that in our 28 reviews that we had, because we know what we intend, okay? Yeah, we'll get another word to replace that.
Yes.
No.
We'll work on that. Okay, so, I mean, before I really get into the proposed 20 budget, I do always just love to mention that Lone Star College does have, has been recognized for excellence in financial reporting for 14 consecutive years. And now to add to it, that Lone Star College has also received a certificate of distinction for our investment policy. So just a good, happy way I always like to start this before I really dig into our budget. So first, I'm going to go through our sources of funds and then comparing us just sort of to lay the foundation of the proposed 2020 budget. This chart shows our sources of funds. Our three primary sources are first, local taxes, second, student revenues, and then third are the state revenues. This shows first the FY18 actual revenues, then the current year, FY19 forecasted revenues, followed by the FY 2020 proposed revenues. The first thing I'll note here is what Dr. had already mentioned about state revenues. This state revenues comprised 22% of revenues in 2018. Those are actual numbers. Are based on our forecast right now for 2019, that would decline to 21%. And then with the additional $700,000, this would be about 20% of our proposed revenues for 2020. So you can see that already here in the state revenues. On the property taxes and student revenues, this is where I definitely wanted to mention that the board policy that the board passed this past fall set a budget goal of equalizing property taxes and student revenues. And we knew we would have to do this over at least a 5-year period, if not longer, to get there. In order to get there, in any given year, we need to increase student revenues by a larger percentage than local taxes in order for that to gain in its proportion. So that is what largely drove this past March when the board did approve the tuition and fee increases up to the max of what that policy allowed for. Now, what has since happened is we received the estimated growth in assessed values, and I'm going to talk about that more in a couple of slides here, but we are expecting very healthy growth in property taxes next year. So that does mean for the 2020 budget, we are actually seeing property taxes and student revenues grow at about the same amount. So I'm going to say towards the budget goal, the 2020 proposed budget does not have us making headway towards it, but it also means that by increasing tuition and fees, we're not losing ground, right? Had we not done that, then property taxes would have made up an even larger share of the 2020 budget. So I wanted to comment on that there to the 2020s. At least the current ratio is held steady.
So last year, when we put the budget together, our growth was 3.66, and that was after the hurricane. So this time it's 6.36 or something like that. 6.6.
Yes.
So we initially said, and I'm really talking to the newer board members, we originally said that we thought we could close that gap in 5 years. When assessed value keeps going up like this, unless we have more student growth, and tentatively we do, but that's going to take longer than 5 years to equalize that percentage. I mean, it's still our goal. It's kind of a nice problem to have because assessed value is growing quicker than what we are at a higher rate than what we originally thought it would. So,
yeah, I definitely don't think it at all is a negative problem because the other goal set by that budget policy was to increase our expenditures per student up closer to the state median. So to do that, you need more overall resources. So it's a good problem to have. But yes, this shows where between Montgomery and Harris County for the 2020 proposed budget, the estimates from the appraisal districts it's actually 7.6% growth. But we did this last year too, just cut off about a percentage because there's still estimates. So just to be conservative, we cut off 1 percentage point. So we have 6.6% is what's included in the proposed 2020 budget. I would also note here that Montgomery County has been growing at a faster rate than Harris County, so their share of the total has been increasing. They had been at about 25%, now they're about 27%. So yes, they're still the smaller share, but they are growing. So the assessed values then is what translates into our tax revenues and our tax rate. So that our tax rate has been flat for several years now, and we are proposing the same thing for 2020 to keep that tax rate flat at 10.78 cents. This is split between 8 cents for maintenance and operations, and then 2.78 cents for the debt service portion of that. The majority, if not all of the rest of this presentation, really focuses on that 8 cents that goes to maintenance and operations. Come July, when you receive the full budget detail to vote on come August, that also includes the debt service budget, which is covered by the 2.78 cents.
And the debt service annual is 60?
It's 69 million
69 million.
for the 2020 budget.
Yep.
So this shows just the 15-year history of our tax rate. We are always happy to show this chart just to show how we are just consistently well below the state average for our tax rate.
Can you go back just for a second for the board? We're actually, I understand assessed value is going up, but not everybody has adjusted their tax rate accordingly. So I think our tax rate is less now than what it was in '05, I think. So.
So that's the overview of property taxes, our tuition and fees. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but this just shows that really what a student pays is a combination of tuition and fees. So this chart here is we're showing the history of a student paying for 12 semester credit hours. The blue being the tuition and then the red being the fees. So for this current fiscal year, the rates effective fall 2018 had that tuition at $908 for that 12 semester credit hours. When you include the increases to tuition and fees that this board did approve this past March, the rates that will be effective this coming fall 2019 would be $994 for 12 semester credit hours.
So let me just make sure, so when we're talking to people, it's about $1,000 in tuition and fees to go to school here for a semester, and then the books, which we're taking a look at book costs and trying to get that price down. It's still a terrific bargain. Even raising, it's still and we're very conscientious about the cost to students and the community over this. So.
Right, I just went through for property taxes and then tuition and fees, kind of the Lone Star College historical snapshot. And now for both, I want to also show how we compare to among the 50 community colleges in the state. So we use the same format for this chart each time. So first, just to kind of orient us to the chart itself, all 50 community colleges are on here. Each one has its own bar. Lone Star College, we always show us in yellow just to help us stand out. We're in yellow. Any colleges that are in our geographic area or our peer colleges are in blue, and then everyone else is in gray. So that's just sort of how to read this chart. This chart is showing how we compare in terms of taxable value. So here we are the fourth highest among all 50 community colleges. And that has us at $195 billion in assessed value, and that's compared to the state median of $9.5 billion.
So a couple of you I've talked with, and this is what happened in the legislature this time. So there's about 7 or 8 of us that are in good financial shape because of where we are and the fact that we're run well. There are about 15 colleges that are okay, and then I counted 18 of them actually lost state funding, which means they've been dropping in contact hours. So that's 40% of the community colleges they've got some struggles right now, financial difficulties. So we pay attention to all that. So Dallas has an entire county, Austin has an entire county, Tarrant has an entire county, Alamo does. So we're in pretty good shape, I think, relative to everybody else. So those are our peer colleges right there, pretty much in the blue. Mm-hmm. Except for College of the Mainland, that's just a different. College of the Mainland, I think, has 6,000, 7,000 students, 6,000, I think.
So being the fourth highest ranked in terms of taxable value, it makes sense then that when you flip to tax revenues, we are the 5th highest, right? That ranking is relatively the same. So here, yes, and it's slight increase. Last year we were the 6th highest. This current year we are the 5th highest. So this current year, this is both the maintenance operations and debt service tax revenues is at $211 million. and that compares to the state median tax revenue for community colleges is 15.
There's a gap in there with Dallas because Dallas charges about 2 cents more. Their tax rate's higher than ours by 2 cents. Their assessed value is larger. So when we were taking a look at the charts, I mean, yeah, if we raise our taxes 2 cents, we'd pick up a lot of money. So we'd close that gap, but that wasn't our goal. It's just every time we look at these charts, there's a reason that Dallas is.
So definitely the benefit of having such a strong tax base, it does mean that when we compare ourselves on tax rate, we are the 7th lowest tax rate among the 50 community colleges, and this is the same ranking as last year. So we're at the 10.78 cents, which we're recommending to leave unchanged. The state median is 17.5 cents for the tax rate. So that's where we stand in terms of property taxes, the comparisons for tuition and fees. First, for the in-district fee. 2017, we were the 11th lowest. So for the fall of 17, we were the 11th lowest for tuition and fees. Last year, we moved down to the 9th lowest. So this is that $908 that I mentioned for fall of 2018 for the 12 semester credit hours. The state median is the $1,092. And I think one of the dynamics that likely explains even the movement sort of down the rankings here from 11th to 9th lowest is, as Dr. had mentioned, some of the other community colleges with dropping enrollments, even if they keep their budget flat, with lower enrollments means that and I'm sorry, I'm actually speaking to a subsequent chart that I'm coming to. I'm getting ahead of myself. But here, this chart here, I wanted to highlight the $994. That's right. I'm sorry. I wanted to show us where, for fall of 19, the rate changes that we have voted in, how that moves us, still staying below that state median for fall of 19. And of course, we don't know where everyone else is going to move to for fall of 19.
Hold on one second, see if they have any, because we know we're going through a lot of information with a lot of charts on there. I just want to make sure we're not running ahead of your thoughts here. It's pretty,
Yeah,
it's
I
a lot of
clearly was
information
running
here.
ahead of mine.
We look at it a lot, so, okay.
Our students are getting a bargain compared to the state.
Well, yeah, we're kind of, I mean, our goal is to be, I mean, our unofficial goal is to be at the state median. So that's what we're striving for in terms of tuition and fees and tax rates and things like that. That's the way we take a look at that.
In particular, right?
Right. Because the state, can you go back just for a second over the tax rate that shows where we are? I mean, the tax median, I mean, you see that as 17 cents. That's way out of anything that we would, I mean, that'd be generating another 200 million for us if we, well, that's not what we do. So part of the reason why our expenditures per FTE are down is because we've been very efficient. So we have economy of scale. So okay, keep going.
So that's how we compare in terms of the in-district tuition and fees, and then just to show also where we stand first and out-of-district. Here we are the 7th highest, and this here, it makes sense because we have done 3 years worth now of raising the out-of-district, and then the subsequent slide will be out-of-state fees. We've done that for 3 years in a row now with the goal, right, of having the local taxpayers not be subsidizing out-of-district and out-of-state students. And that is what drove the calculations for what the rate increases were. So this current year, an out-of-district student pays $2,048. The new rate that will be effective fall of 2019 is $2,200. And then for out-of-state fee, here we're the 15th highest. Same thing, we're at about just below $2,500 for an out-of-state student with the rate increases approved in March. This fall 2019, that'll go up to about 2,900. But this year is the chart that I had already gotten ahead of myself to and started speaking to. This is how we compare in terms of our expenditures per full-time student equivalent. So here we are the 13th lowest, right? And this is a decrease from had been the 16th lowest. So the board policy, that budget goal, is for us to get up to the state median. But over this last year, the state median increased per student by more than our expenditures increased. And it does seem likely that part of what's driving that is for community colleges that if they keep their budget flat but have dropping enrollment, then now their amount spent per student goes up. But this is where, right, we did increase what we're spending per student from $99.58 to $10,000, but the state median increased from about $600 per student, whereas we increased about $50 per student. So that's.
Does that make sense to so our goal, our budget, when we approved the policy change last year, it was to get us up to the state median over roughly a 5-year period, and that's why we were raising tuition. And that's it's just going to take us 5 years to get up to that based on the way we looked at the projections.
So that's where Lone Star College stands in terms of historical property tax revenues and our tuition and fees and kind of how we compare, and just wanted to lay this foundation for showing this recommended FY20 budget. So first here is the proposed revenue budget for FY20. Up here, right, first we have the tax revenues, student revenues, state revenues, and then some miscellaneous revenues. Just for the framework, in FY18, our actual total revenues was about $360 million. This current year, we budgeted $381 million, but we do have, right, some negative variances that we've talked about in the monthly financial reports in both student revenues, with our enrollment growth being less than we had estimated, and the same thing with property taxes. So while we had budgeted this current year $381 million, currently we're forecasting our revenues this year will be $371 million. So about $10 million less than what we had estimated in the budget. So then what we are estimating for the FY20 proposed budget is $392 million in revenues. So it's a $20 million increase from where we think actual revenues will be this current year, but from what we budgeted this current year, from what we were expecting to get when we built this year's budget, it's a $10 million increase. So that $392 million is about a $10.9 million increase over the $381 that had been budgeted for this current year. So we have $10.9 million in new revenues, but also in this year's expenditure budget, right, in response to, in particular, the student revenues coming in below the estimated budget, we did make the budget reductions, right, to address that. So our expenditure budget from the current year, we have $5 million that is available for sort of a new allocation to go towards new priorities in FY20. So that's what leaves us for the FY20 budget about $16 million in new resources to be allocated.
So if we don't grow, where it says enrollment growth in the second category, we're assuming 2.5.
Yes.
So right now we're at as of today, we're at 3.9. But if we come in with a 1.25, we will cut the budget. And so we won't go in, and we'll do that immediately. And I mean, we take it from the colleges and we take it from the system office, and we're prepared for that. So hopefully that doesn't work. We were on a track before, but we did it last time. It's just what we do. I know sometimes it looks like when we come to you and we're short in one place and we pick it up in another, it's within the framework of the overall budget. So we're not set to the, and we're not going to run deficits in the budget. We're not going to do that. So we'll come back to you immediately. We'll know by official day, which would be maybe by the September board meeting. We'd be cutting it close on September board, but we'll be able to tell around 1st of September kind of where we are with everything. So.
Yes, we did that this year. We did by each semester. We did budget cuts for the fall semester, then again in spring, and we're getting ready to do so again for summer. When those don't hit, we do the budget reductions.
So the colleges all have, they give us projections, and then we put everything together and come up with a system projection. That's how we do things, and it's, I mean, there's 12 different ways to do this. The bottom line is either we have the money to do what we wanted or we don't have the money to do it. If we don't have the money, then we're not going to go far into the budget year hoping that things get better in the spring or hoping they get better in the summer. It just doesn't, it's like your household. I mean, we've probably all done that at one time or another, but that's not a good way to run your business. So we'll make those cuts immediately. We're not going to wait, and we'll cut, and then we'll see where we are after that. So. Mm-hmm.
There, now I'm on.
Yes.
Okay, so looking at this chart, if I'm understanding it correctly, 2018 actual was $360 million. Budget for 2019 was 280, so that's an increase of 20, let's call it 20 million.
Yes.
But we were off by 10 million.
Yes.
What was the key factor that caused us to be off 10 million, and how do we know we won't encounter that problem again?
So 2 key factors. The first one was student revenues. In the FY19 budget, we had estimated 0% enrollment growth. And there we did actually have negative growth. So student revenues, it's in the monthly financials. There we're estimated to be, I think it was about 5.3, oh, I have it up here actually, 5.3 million. Sure I'm seeing the right spot. Yeah, 5.3 million below the budget, primarily due to that enrollment decline. But in response to that, we made the budget cuts. The other, about 5.6 million, was a result of property taxes. And there it was just, when we dug back into our methodology, we had just overestimated. We had estimated new properties separately from existing properties. And the appraisal district's report was on both. So it was definitely a misunderstanding on our part of what was included in the estimates that the appraisal district provided us last year. So between that and also the increase in the exemption rate within the property taxes. We had the assessed value, but the exemption rate and the ceilings hits after the fact. So that proportion increased. So those things were just, frankly, surprises for us. And we made that adjustment, and we now are definitely including those things that we've learned our lessons from in this new estimate for 2020.
But the new estimate increases the budget 20 million again over the previous year. Wouldn't it be better to scale our estimates back and not have to then suddenly make budget cuts in the middle of the year?
Well, so had I used the same methodology that I did last year, because the assessed value growth is 6.66%, whereas last year I was using 3.6%, had I used the same methodology as last year, the $20 million number would be even larger. So in effect, I've already scaled that back by drastically changing our calculation methodology for those property taxes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're already seeing the scaled back number. Okay. The difference now is last year it was a 3.6% growth rate. This year it's a 6.6 growth rate. So really that additional growth rate is offsetting what we've scaled back in our methodology.
It's really a question of plan versus actual. Right, this is planned. What you actually experience, you really don't know. And if I'm interpreting what you both have said, one of the risks for not achieving this would be enrollment not being at 2.5%, right, as a growth. So you mitigate that through your reserves, or if you have to adjust during the year, you mitigate that through replan. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
For the enrollment growth, yes, that one specifically, we adjust through pretty much immediate budget reductions to our expenditures. So that one, we work to not hit our reserves.
Right.
We make immediate budget reductions.
Do you, in your budget, and I may be getting ahead of you, do you have any other, let's call it risk issues that may negatively affect your planned budget or your proposed budget?
Subsequent to this, I'll get into the expenditure side of the budget. But in terms of risk, I would suppose the main places is going to be in the revenue budget, because that's where a lot of this, short of the actual voted changes in tuition and fees or the tax rate, other than those mechanisms, where we don't necessarily have full control over what those revenues are.
But you should plan for that, right?
We do our best to estimate them, as opposed to on the expenditure side, that's where we do have more direct control to go in and make budget cuts.
Right, got it, okay. Thank
So,
you.
for example, this current year, like I said, we have been making budget cuts in response to the enrollment being below what we had estimated. We did not make the same budget cuts for property taxes being below what we had estimated. We could have, but we had enough reserves. So that's where there could be another instance where the management choice could be different. It could be, let's go make the budget cut. So the expenditure side is really the side we just have more control over than the revenue side.
So just operationally, if you're at the college and you estimated a 2% growth and you only grew 1 or 0, then you shouldn't be spending that money, right? I mean, that's kind of the way I'm looking at this.
Right,
That's the
right.
reason.
It's a risk mitigation here. I mean,
Right.
you've got a planned budget.
Right.
And then you've gone through, I'm coming from a risk analysis perspective. You've done that, then you have a plan in case that revenue is not there. That's all I'm getting, and you do. That's
I agree.
all I'm trying to verify. And you see that as a risk, so that makes me feel good. So,
The biggest risk to me, I mean, I know we're talking about different kind of risk here, is I would like to get through this year without a hurricane coming in.
Yeah.
To give us a
That-
year to
that's
get
a
back
risk.
on our feet again, and we have insurance, a lot more insurance, but we saw, and in our thinking going forward, we need to assume that's going to happen again, some variation of
Absolutely it
that.
will.
And we saw what could happen, not only in facilities damage, but enrollment decreases and a loss of tuition and fees and a loss in assessed value. We saw all of that. So now we have insurance to cover all that, which we had insurance, but we didn't have that kind of insurance before. So, but it is very disruptive, to say the least, to what we went through. So,
Thank you.
Could you give me just a quick definition for offsets and waivers?
Mike,
I'm sorry, could you give me just a quick definition or example of what offsets and waivers are or might be?
Yes, so for waivers, for example, so if we dual credit students, for example, they pay tuition and fees, but then we waive the fees. So there, for example, so that's just where we have to make an adjustment, because if we just do the 2.5% growth or the $5 credit tuition fee estimate on revenues, we're doing so on a typical student paying tuition and fees. But then where we do have some categories of students that get some form of waiver, right? Some of that it is
fire
marked as a
department,
revenue.
the state mandates a lot of these. I mean, it's valedictorians, fire department, police officers' children. There's a list of them by code. So, having said that, I think we get contact or reimbursement for the students enrolled. I know we do on dual credit.
Yes,
So
on dual credit we
it
get.
shows as a negative there, but we pick it up on the other side, on the income side. So,
With the recent legislation expanding availability of dual credit to Texas students?
any dual credit legislation helps us, by the way, because of our size, and we have 16 or 17,000 students this fall, but there was no negative dual credit implication.
Okay, so this is the revenue budget. This shows you the recommended expenditure budget. So first here, I just want to talk through how within the expenditure budget, we do have different funds, and this is where we do just segregate different types of activities. I mean, of course, the main fund that most of us do most of the college's regular work out of is the operating Fund 10. But we do have these other funds. For example, Fund 14 is the student activity fee fund, and the main reason I want to talk about that briefly is in that fund, right, included in that list of fees, one of them is the student activity fee, and that all of those revenues goes directly into this fund, and those can only be spent towards student activities. Just over the years, a balance had built up there, and they need to go spend it. That's all that these funds can be spent on. So there, you do see at the very bottom, there is a use of reserves in Fund 14 because there's a balance just as built up, and it's time that we need to go spend it. So I did want to note that. But we do also have the technology fund, Fund 15. The technology fee goes into this fund, and the funds in here are only spent on technology across the system. We also have the corporate college fund, is Fund 16, and then in the 20 series is our auxiliary revenue. So this is just our other miscellaneous, more business type revenue sources. So Fund 20 is the primary auxiliary fund. So like bookstore revenues, for example, other things goes into that fund. And then 23 are educational tenants, and 24 are business tenants. So all of these funds do get rolled up into this expenditure budget, but of course the bulk of this is Fund 10 operating. And that's where I want to mention, right, we have $15.2 million in additions to the budget, to the expenditure budget from the prior year's budget of recurring expenses. So you can see at the top, right, all the way to the right, total all funds, that same revenue budget that we just discussed on the last slide of $392 million. But you see Fund 10, the operating fund of that is $361. So we have $361 million in revenues in the operating fund, and then $360 of expenditures. So we are having $565,000 addition to reserves coming from the operating fund. And I just wanted to did want to talk that through, because total all funds is, you see the small negative 21,000, but that's primarily because we do need to spend down the excess balance that's built up in the student activity fee fund. So that's our expenditure budget. And then how this all kind of wraps up together towards our reserve goal of 16 to 20%, right? And FY18 actual, we ended FY18 at 18.9%. And this is part of why we want these reserves, to provide us these cushions, because so we went into the FY19 budget targeting an 18% reserve balance. Right now, our forecast has us ending this current year at 16.4%. Now you can see in the cash reserve balance itself, the cash itself is at $60.9 million. For the FY20 budget, we've essentially left it flat. I think rounding it's at $60.8 million. So we've left the actual dollar amount of reserves that we have flat. Because the expenditure budget itself is larger, the percentage goes down, but we've definitely kept that at the 16%. But that is where I wanted to note it. The actual cash on hand, we are keeping essentially flat. And just with that ratio of expenditures, that brings us to 16% ending for the FY20 budget.
Just a quick question, somewhat related. The money you anticipated, and I haven't kept up with the governor's son or not, but you were getting $13 million from the legislature for the governor's son to build. Did that go through?
The $13 million for the hurricane is going back to the bond fund, right? That's what he asked.
It's not going to go back to the bond. It's going to go back to, we've been using Fund 35 for all of our Harvey expenses.
Okay.
So it does mean that that $13 million instead does not need to come out of either bond or reserves.
Okay, but it's going to go back to the specific budget account you just spoke of, right?
Yes.
And where does that fit in here, that account?
So that account is not included in this operating portion in the 3 series. The Fund 35, it operates like a grant-type fund, so that's the fund we've been using to track all of our Hurricane Harvey expenses. And I'll say more about it in the regular monthly financial
Okay.
report, but
Go
in
ahead.
that fund, all of our expenses goes in there. But then the insurance proceeds went in there to offset those expenses. As we receive FEMA reimbursements, they go into that fund to offset that. For each of the FEMA reimbursements, there is a local match, and I had estimated that to be around 15 million. So that's part of what this 13 million is now going to help cover.
Right.
At the end of the day, we do need to clean Fund 35 when it's all done, and anything left expended in that fund will need to be paid for either out of bond funds or our reserves.
Thank
So
you.
what this means is down the road, there's going to be less that needs to come back to either bond funds or reserves.
Jennifer, just so the board knows, so we've got the cash reserves, and then we've got the other, how are you paying out of Fund 35? Those are, that's the monthly,
That's just sort of out of our total cash account. Yet when we talk about the 16 to 20% reserves, that is not literally all of our cash. That is our long-term cash that we've put into investments to be specifically our reserves. That does not include our operating cash. At any given time, we probably have definitely north of 200 million, maybe 300 million in actual cash at any given time.
in my mind, it's almost like what you do in your household. At certain times, you've got more cash on hand, even though you've got expenditures coming up. So that's how we were funding 35, knowing that we've got to pay that back. I mean, that, at the end of the day, even in your own household, somewhere, you got to make that right, so.
Well, when all that settles out, whenever it does, I mean, you're going to have to, like you said, account it out. I mean, it's going to have to go either positive to the bottom line or a
Yes.
negative to a write-off, right?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. As soon as, right, we still have a lot of Kingwood invoices coming in. As soon as that gets a bit closer to being completed and having the final expenditures in that fund, I'm definitely going to have someone come in and do a full reconciliation of that fund to get this closed out, once we're ready to do that.
And at that point, I guess at the next, whatever the next budget report is, you'll talk about that, I assume.
Yeah, when it gets to that point, I mean, it'll be a combination of when when all of the final invoices have come in.
Yeah.
Possibly depending on the FEMA
But-
process, yeah.
It's tied out. Thank you.
So next, I do want to get into some more detail on the expenditure budget. First, this just shows of our total expenditure budget, how that's split between these different classifications. So 54% is going towards instruction and 16% towards student services.
I asked Jennifer to put together a chart or a report that shows where we stand compared to our peer colleges. If the percentage, we're spending 54 on instruction, and where we are with administrative costs or student services costs, however that might be. So sometime in the near future, you're going to get a report that shows where we stand compared to everybody else. So.
Yeah, because these classifications are national, so it's consistent among colleges. So also, Dr. Head, right back in the overview, talked through our strategic priorities. So we do put, especially the budget additions, through our strategic priorities to identify what we're focusing on. And this has been typical, where the largest portion of the additional expenditures goes towards culture. But this goes through in detail what is comprising our expenditure additions. So under academic and workforce program quality, we're adding $6 million. The largest piece of this, $3.5 million, is new facility funding. So you saw the lists earlier of completed construction projects and projects still to come, right? The projects themselves are paid out of bond funds, but when that building opens, we need to go operate it, and we need to make sure we have planned for doing so. And that's what this $3.5 million is. We also have in this budget 28 new faculty, and that's $2 million. And then $500,000 that will get allocated out to the colleges for growth. That it won't get allocated out until we're into the budget year and we see whether we hit that 2.5% enrollment growth estimate.
So on the new faculty, we will be at a 50-50 ratio, full-time, part-time, probably in 2023, I think in our 5-year plan. That's what it shows.
Yep.
And we're going to give you an update in just a minute on where we are with the adjuncts, but that was our goal, was to get to a 50-50 ratio, and we're almost there.
What would be the net add this year?
In the spring, it was 51-49, 51% adjunct, 49 full-time. In the fall, are you going to go into that? Are you going to go into the, well, so what happens is, it depends on when you ask the question. So when you look at some of the reports that we heard that came from TCCTA, so it depends on the question they're asking. And Mario, correct me if I'm wrong, the question has to do with how many, or Jennifer, one of the two of you, how many you actually have and how many you have budgeted.
Right.
And I think they were doing how many do you actually have, because we have budgeted, but remember, a lot of the faculty positions are not filled in the fall just because of the timing on it. In other words, historically, we don't release a lot of the money until we know what the budget looks like. So
Right.
they can't fill the positions in the fall. But in the spring, it was 51-49, and we have the numbers on that to show how we calculate all that in the budget. So.
Well, assuming that you filled them all, just assume that. So how many net adds would that be if you were to fill your planned numbers?
I mean, what would be the,
Like
Well,
the new
from now, you got a current faculty headcount
we
now.
think in
If you
the,
were to fill those, what would be the net?
I think it's
based on this budget?
51,
I mean, this funding here is for 28 additional
Up-
full-time faculty.
Above what, okay.
Above, right, that's the new faculty positions to be added.
And
And
that
then
would
we-
bring you up to the 50-50 mark.
no, it'll put us up to 51-49, what's the goal? It's 51-49 is in the chart? If we fill all those positions, it'll be 51 adjunct, 51% adjunct. There's a number of sections taught. 51% adjunct, 49% full-time of the number of sections.
Thanks.
Yes. So then here,
Let me just add one more thing. We have that broken down into exact detail on our 5-year chart, which I'd be glad to show you how that, I mean, you've seen it before, but I'm talking about the detail of it. I asked the same question after the last meeting, so.
so then towards the student success priority, right, first we have Houston North, our 7th college. One of the motivations, right, for the 7th college was to also increase the expenditure per head count for those locations. So we have had a 3-year plan to increase the budget there for Houston North. Last year we had added $700,000, just kind of as the initial funds, and now we're adding $1.5 million in this budget towards Houston North. We also have funds going towards communities and schools, and then there's $500,000 in here for performance funding. Now this gets allocated out to the colleges based on performance metrics. Typically during this presentation, I have a chart to actually show which colleges, how the allocation of the $500,000 is split among the colleges. I don't have that for you here today because this year, all of the presidents have worked together on those metrics to have them aligned better with the state performance metrics that the state legislature uses to allocate their student success funds. So they've worked to align those metrics better. And so we're still getting some of that finalized. So by the time I come back in August with the budget detail, I'm going to have that table that shows how this $500,000 gets allocated among the colleges based on the performance metrics.
But what's happening at the state level is they're putting more and more money in performance funding, which we actually, Lone Star helped develop the performance funding model there. So we're trying to mirror that internally, and if you take a look at those and we'll show you those, they make sense. But that's what we want. I mean, if those are the state goals, then we need to be in alignment with that because that's the way they're giving the money out. So, and they increased, they did not, I don't think they increased the core contact hour amount. They increased the performance funding percentage this year, which is what we're in favor of. When we were talking with them, we wanted more money in performance funding because if you don't do that, then your reward just people showing up. You're just giving them money for people showing up, not for performance. So,
So next, under culture, here first, the big chunk, 6.3 million is proposed for 3% across the board increase for all employees. This would be effective September 1st. And then in addition to that, there is proposed compensation changes related to just dealing with overall compression. Salary is among the different employees. Here, the plan is to implement this mid-year. So the actual amount of increases given out to employees would total $5 million. But with a mid-year implementation, in this year's budget, the cost would be 2.5. Now, this does mean that rolling into next year, working on the 21 budget, when we have estimated new revenues for that budget, 2.5 needs to come off the top to pay for the balance of this increase. So that's those compensation changes. And then additionally, an adjunct pay increase of $2, which is the equivalent of 4.8%, would be 1.5 million in these compensation changes.
and that'll put us number 2 in the region, we think?
It would put us number 2, maybe number 3, depending on, right, I didn't have data on what all other community colleges' plans are, so depending on how they change theirs, but it would definitely increase us significantly.
We didn't have the data because they don't respond to our inquiries, right? It's not that we didn't ask, but we were
Many did.
really
just a few
close.
didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our adjunct rate will be, College of the Mainland is really out of sync with everybody else, and
So it's Alvin Community College.
Alvin.
So for a 3-credit-hour course, Alvin Community College is ranked number 1 because they're at almost $2,500. But if you look at the list, there's a huge drop from them to number 2, which is Wharton County Junior College at $2,100. Now, this increase here would take us up to $2,100.
and then that would put us at number,
So it would, I guess it would put us tied for number 2.
yeah.
And depending on, whether these other community colleges make
We did
changes.
talk about this. So this is a 4.8% increase. This is $43.75 an hour.
Yes.
We're trying to be fair to everybody. So we've got employees, part-time employees, who are giving a 3% raise. And so that's when we're looking at a $2 raise, which is normally what we do $2 every other year. But that's a 4.8% raise, so.
Well, in my opinion, having been an adjunct faculty at one time, that you ought to strive to be number 1 here. That's my opinion.
So finally, under financial responsibility and accountability, so first here, we kind of have a reconciliation on the insurance, right? This current year, this past August, the board approved increasing our insurance premiums by about $1.2 million, and that was done after the budget had been put together. So of that $1.2 million, I think in the fall, I had already identified for everyone here how we were going to pay for that. But a portion of that, $700,000 specifically, was in one-time sources, so I can't reuse those. So I just needed to get this reconciliation in here to make sure there's permanent funding in the budget for the full increase in our insurance premium. And then we do have system initiatives and a planning consultant, Dr. Head, I think, mentioned earlier, especially with the state legislature and growth, needing to do some planning on how to deal with our long-term growth. And finally, the main thing I want to mention is this adjustment for North Harris. So what has happened here is for North Harris, for several years in a row now, they have had declining enrollments. But their budget has maybe remained flat, if not increased some. So what that has meant is that we kind of need to do a recalibration. Their budget per head count has gotten to be much larger than the system-wide average. The system-wide average is about $2,400 for the college's budget per head count. North Harris looks like they would stand at about $3,000 per head count. So what we are doing here is that recalibration to get them sort of more in line with the system average expenditure budget for the colleges based on their enrollment.
Any feel as to how that percentage breaks out in their operational budget? Is there any one item that stands out that increases it more than another? I mean, or just they burn more electricity? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Well, here it's the faculty ratio of how many faculty per student, right? As their enrollments have declined, the ratio of the number of faculty to students has increased. And
So the average, just looking at it over the years, has been about 100 for every 100 students, or every one faculty, 100 students. So they are right now 70.
the ratio is about 70 students.
You're
per
doing
faculty.
with 5, well, so for workforce programs, it's about 19, right? And for academic, it's about 23 is the average class size. So they're about 40 faculty over where they should be, probably, something like that.
But they're just overstaffed for their.
Yes, and the reason for that, there is a reason, and that's that not too many people leave over there, and then the enrollment started dropping. And so we haven't made the adjustment. Now, what's going to be happening is, if we had to make a decision today, in our 5-year plan, we were going to add, say, 28 to 30 faculty every year, but we need to start shifting some of those faculty. Nobody's losing their jobs. We're not doing that. But we can make those shifts because we have needs at other places that are growing. And we have just started talking about that. I mean, we've been talking about it for some time, but I
You
think
could also make trade-offs in your part-time faculty, couldn't you? I mean, if you had to shift personnel to other locations where you have.
right. That's what we want to do.
Of course, we want to make sure we don't send it into a negative spiral, because you can also run into problems if there's not enough budget to hire enough adjuncts, but you have to give full-timers the full load. You
Right.
can end up with full-timers that don't have classes as large as they could have, because you had to split them to make sure full-timers had their load. Now you need adjuncts. So we want to be very careful about not sending any of our facilities into a negative spiral.
We agree. I agree.
And I think that's part of why, frankly, we've also waited so long to do this adjustment. It's been several years now of the enrollment declines. This was not the immediate response.
Well, every year, and then every year I keep thinking this is going to be the year that we've made the adjustment, and then they go up. And I'm always an optimist about that. And I thought, well, once we came out of the hurricane, and that had some impact on everybody, I think. Right now, as of today, we were down 10%, 13%. I don't see us, it's still early during the summer, but I think the students are over there. We just have to, we're spending a lot of time talking about this, so, and doing something about it, so.
And this still does leave them above the system average. I mentioned the system average is around 2,400. This adjustment brings them from about 3,000 per head count down to 2,800. So this is still leaving them per student head count, the highest per head count budget of all of our colleges.
What's causing the enrollment drain? Are they shifting to Aldine? Are they shifting
I don't
to
think so.
St. What's causing the enrollment drain?
As of last week, we've got several people working on this, but as of last week, the workforce programs, the enrollments are down in the workforce programs, Joe? How about what I would ask you is let us come back in August and I'll tell you, or I'll send the report to the board, because we've got different offices trying to identify what the issue is. And we've stepped it up in marketing again. That North Harris right now for us is the anomaly. And I think that, I think the population is there. There's something that we're not doing, and I can't figure out whether it's financial aid, the courses, the mixture that we're offering. The students are there, though. And I think part of this was the economy. It's, when you have a good economy like this, sometimes when people are not coming to school like they used to, which explains some of the workforce issues, some of the rest of it, I don't know. I don't think it should be down over the long term, though. I know I was the president there, and I was told that the enrollments would never grow, and we had huge growth over there. So we're taking and Gerald's involved in this, so we're taking a very, very close look at everything to see what we need to do with those enrollments.
Yeah, I grew up over there, and it's just the demographics are changing there. And I think it's partly what you said. I think also what's needed is what Dr. Wright over there is facing with Houston North. You're going to have people go out and be evangelists to bring people in. That's a different model here.
Right, very
but
different.
That's
I agree.
the trend. You tell me, you're the educators, but I think that's the trend.
No, I think I think the marketing and the recruiting and everything else, we have to be a little different down there than, so. I don't think in many cases the parents and the students don't know what they don't know. And so we have to, I mean, what we talked about, just some things we're talking about, and we'll come back and give you an update, is we have to start at an earlier age. We have to remind them that this is their college, and we have to remind the parents that we'll help you. Money is not going to keep you from going to college if you need. And we're introducing Dr. Blanson in the second half. Archie, would you hold up your hand, please? He's the Vice Chancellor, or will be the new Vice Chancellor for Student Services, but he was the Deputy Superintendent at Aldine. I think, I'm not going to ask him to talk today, but I think he's got some insight into what we need to be doing down there. Correct? Okay. So.
Yeah, this is definitely a balancing act. Like I said, this still keeps them above the average, but at the same time, right, we also want to make sure there's enough resources for the other colleges that are also growing and not hinder that.
Let me
So
make
these
sure,
are-
we got 5 slides left? How many
Yeah,
slides?
almost done.
Okay.
So this is our recommended additions. I've gone through a lot, so just the real quick highlights. So this is all repetitive. 16 million in new resources, and the bulk of that comes from 8.3 million tuition and fees, 8.3 property taxes. And we have 2.5% assumed enrollment growth is 2.5 million. And then 15 million in net new expenses, and this is 6.3 million in the 3% across the board increase, plus the compression study is 2.5 million. This does not add up to the 15 million. This is the highlights.
11, so that's 13.5 million out of the new money is going to employee compensation. So.
Yeah. Right, because then on here, right, is also the 28 new faculty and then the 1.5 million for the adjunct salary increase. So this is just sort of a quick recap of our expenses and our revenues. And this is where finally I just wanted to wrap up with what steps come next. Right, this is an overview of the budget that we are building. It is not yet completed. From here, we continue to complete the budget detail following this outline that I've showed everyone here. And that budget detail, the board receives about the 3rd week of July. And the actual budget for adoption is on the August board agenda. So that is when the board would vote on this budget. And like I said, you will receive the budget detail that encompasses what I've gone through today. And I typically provide a short summary if there's anything that's changed from what I've said today. But following that, so for the 2020 budget, right, this board has already approved the tuition and fee increases. It does still have to set the tax rate. That happens in the fall. We receive right now we're operating off of estimated values from the appraisal districts. Late August is when we receive the certified values. So we get those certified values, and then at the September board meeting is when the board proposes the tax rate and sets our public hearings. During September, we have 2 public hearings, and then is the October board meeting that the board votes on the tax rate. So that is sort of the next steps of the 2020 budget. And that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Good job.
Okay. Board members, any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just
Yes, go ahead.
This is obviously my first budget at Lone Star, and I've been a student and involved in the community, but I want to compliment everyone involved. And Jennifer, you and your team, I know you have a lot of people behind the scenes that make all this happen. It's not magic, so good work, and thank you for the attention to detail and the explanations. As someone that's new to this, I was able to understand it, so that's an accomplishment.
Yeah,
And,
and I
do
wanna
us a
thank-
favor.
I do want to thank a lot of the team is here. It's not just my team, it's also teams at the campuses as well. A lot of people are here, a lot of people are not, but yes, definitely everyone throughout this system puts a
At
lot of
least
work
those
into
that are
this.
here, raise your hand, please, if you're involved with putting together the budget.
Well, that's about,
Thank you so much.
And
that's
then
about
also,
everybody in the room.
I know, I figured it was going to be that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could continue, I apologize. And Steve, I want to compliment you on your leadership on this as well and taking us down a path that's financially sound and then also respects what our faculty and students need to accomplish our goals. So appreciate it.
Well said.
I did want to point out just one thing. When we had, in that chart, it said 48% of our new money is going to culture, right? Something like that.
Yeah, about half of the budget additions.
And the culture is going to employees. That's where we fell behind a couple of years ago, I think, in the compensation issue, especially on the compression issues, where the salaries got jammed up. And so we're trying to, if you move somebody up, then you got to move the next. And so we've got a multi-year plan over that. It's expensive, but we just thought that was the priority instead of operational. We can handle the operational stuff, even with our growth. So, but that's our priority. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's nothing further, we will adjourn until our regular meeting at 5 o'clock. mic off. I didn't say anything bad.
I think you have to be pretty close to them.
Okay, board members. Board members, may It is now time for our regular meeting. Call the meeting to order. And let us stand and repeat the pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for all. And it remains standing just for a second. Today is the 75th, I'm going to use the term, anniversary of D-Day. And in recognition of those individuals that were involved on that day, and also for our current military personnel, let's recognize them with a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, Dr. Head, would you certify the posting of our meeting tonight?
Yes, I certify it was posted in accordance with the law.
Thank you, Dr. Head. In keeping with our regular standards, we will now move into closed session under Section 551.071, Section 551.072, and Section 551.076. We will reconvene our and 551.074. We will reconvene our regular meeting no earlier than 6 p.m. meetings.